Hey, Doug, good to see you.
Hey, you too, Chris.
I'm used to just seeing your name down there.
Yeah, I'm getting used to this now, I guess. Well, actually, it's really hard to get cameras right now. So we were down cameras, and so finally got a hold of one to use for tonight.
Yeah, well, good. I'm glad you're able to.
Yeah.
Okay, looks like it's time. We'll go ahead and call to order this meeting of the Owasso City Council. Welcome, everyone. We'll start with item number 2, which is an invocation from our city manager, Warren Lear.
Thank you, Mayor. Would you pray with me? Father, we thank you for this beautiful day. We thank you for your blessings even in this very difficult time. Father, we ask for your favor and your comfort on healthcare workers around the world, on bereaved families, on those that are sick. Father, we pray for healing. We pray for strength and endurance. Pray for wisdom. Father, we pray for a vaccine. Father, we just ask that you would use this time to draw us together. There are so many that are performing so well. We thank you for them. And Father, we ask for wisdom this evening and ask that you would guide our community and our state, our government at the state level, the county level, and the local level. Help us to make wise decisions, Father, for we ask it in Christ's name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Warren. Item number 3 is roll call.
Mayor Chris Kelly.
Here.
Vice Mayor Bill Bush.
Here.
Councilor Doug Bonebrake.
Here.
Councilor Lyndall Dunn.
Here.
Councilor Kelly Lewis.
Here.
Item 4 is consideration and appropriate action relating to requests for approval of the consent agenda.
I'll move we approve.
Second.
Mr. Bonebrake.
Yes.
Mr. Bush.
Yes.
Mr. Dunn.
Yes.
Ms. Lewis.
Yes.
Mr. Kelly.
Yes. Item 6 is consideration and appropriate action relating to the COVID-19 pandemic and local public health issues. I'm going to start this item off actually by passing this over to our city manager, Warren Lear. He's going to update us on kind of some of the activities that have happened over the last week and some of the more recent information, and then we'll deliberate.
Thank you, Mayor. As all the council is aware, and probably everyone in listening to this, there are numerous reports available every day, and I forward some of those to you, and I'll try to hit some of the high points. But before I do that, I'd like to give a short summary of some of the conference calls last week that involved Governor Stitt, involved Tulsa Mayor Bynum, involved area city managers and mayors and others. There are many discussions currently. Everyone wants to project a time, a strategy for reopening. As Mayor Bynum stated in a call, it's about 2 different tracks. It's how and when. And both of those are a little bit unknown, but there's a lot of discussion. Anyone who's reading the Tulsa World or any media is reading about some of the different considerations that are being made. But just a few gleanings from some of those calls. I can tell you that Governor Stitt and Oklahoma City Mayor Holt and Tulsa Mayor Bynum are all talking. They all understand a benefit of coordination and consistency in whatever occurs going forward. Everyone favors a phased approach. You can find on the federal website It's actually www.whitehouse.gov/openingamerica/#criteria. There's 3 phases listed there that are, I think they're CDC informed, I'm not sure, but they're very reasonable phases. I think the governor and I know the Tulsa mayor are considering those phases in their discussions. There's certainly the framework for some possible reopening strategies. I can tell you further that Governor Stitt has been on several conference calls. One of the calls that he was on was with 600 pastors across Oklahoma, and I think there's some belief, and I'm going through these things in no certain order, there's some belief on the part of many pastors that May 3rd is a possible date to resume church gatherings. I can't imagine that at this point, but that was what was heard by some. So there are some challenges when public officials start to project possible dates. I believe the governor is targeting May 1st as a possible reopening for businesses. I think it's only fair to discuss that openly. It's in the media. I think you're aware of these things. So those are a few highlights. Mayor Bynum has quoted Dr. Bruce Dart from the Tulsa Health Department, who we've utilized a great deal. He's quoted Dr. Dart as needing to see 7 consecutive days of decreases in positive new COVID-19 cases. And as I mentioned, he's looking for the how. He's appointed a committee. He's appointed several task forces and subcommittees to explore, especially in certain areas, the reopening of parks, salons, gyms, restaurants, how to do it, and with what strategy. So there's a great deal of discussion. Governor Stitt also, as you're aware, asked for some things to happen right now, restoring right away elective surgeries and dental work very soon. And so we're monitoring all those things, and it's just a perception at this point, but there seems to be a great deal of talk about reopening. The hospitalization numbers are very good. Governor Stitt talks about those a lot. It's true that when you look at projected hospitalizations and utilization of hospital beds and ICU and ventilators, those numbers have been well below and fewer than what was expected. So truly there was a flattening of the curve, as Governor Stitt has continued to say. There's a flattening of the curve in terms of hospitalization. Those numbers are good. On that, or along those lines, I'm happy to say that Owasso nursing home cases are non-existent. They're on the reports that we receive. We get a great deal of detail now from the State Department of Health, and so I'm happy to say that Owasso nursing home cases have not occurred so far. While I'm at that point, our city services remain at a very high level. Our city hall is open, and no city employees have contracted the coronavirus. So that's been very welcome news. We are just getting ready to go into the projected peak time for coronavirus activity in our state. At one point, the number was the date was April 15th, and then it moved back to April 21, April 22, and then it looked like an extended peak or a plateau from April 22 to May 7, wherein deaths statewide would occur in the 20 to 25 range. That projection has been adjusted. Right now, it's being projected that for the next few days, we might see as many as, or an average of about 9 deaths per day in the state. And then by May 5th, that projection drops to 6 deaths, and by May 15th, down to 3 deaths statewide, and then on down. However, with that said, just yesterday there were 21 deaths. This was statewide. This was by far the highest to date. The previous high number of deaths statewide were 15 on April 15th and 16 on April 7th. And then it's mostly been below 5 or 6, but there's a couple other days with 7 or 8 deaths. Our total deaths statewide right now are 165 total Tulsa County deaths are 25. Tulsa County just barely has the highest number of deaths by county. Oklahoma County's had 24 and Cleveland County's had 23. There are 2,807 COVID-19 confirmed cases in Oklahoma. Those are going to continue to increase with more testing as testing continues to ramp up. So there's a lot of, I wouldn't say random, but a lot of numbers there. The good news is that the projected peak has been reduced. As I said, hopefully the 21 deaths that were reported yesterday is somewhat of an anomaly, and we can lower it down to the projected below 10 numbers that are being talked about. With all of that said, I really believe we'll know more by next week as we get through these next 5 to 7 days to see what the week brings, because they are still projecting the high point to be these next 3 or 4 days. And I think with that, I'll stop and see if there are any questions. I know that's a lot of numbers.
Okay. Thanks, Warren. As we talked about a little bit last week, this is our last scheduled meeting prior to our order ending on the 30th. So in the next 7 or 8 days leading up to that, we've got to come up with what our plan's going to be. We've got a framework that we've been discussing, but we're going to have to likely call a special meeting before the 30th so we can kind of roll out those plans. But as Warren said, we don't have all the information we need to make these decisions yet. We've been meeting with area mayors and city managers. There's another one of those meetings on Friday, which I'm hopeful some more information, updated information will come out of that. We also are meeting locally with Chelsea Lebo, our economic development coordinator, has done a great job of talking to our area businesses here in Owasso, as well as Gary Aiken from the chamber. We're going to meet with them on Friday and get kind of the collective pulse of the businesses here to determine what this rollout looks like if the health department kind of gives us the go ahead to start to open things back up. Ultimately, everything has to go through the health department based on kind of what we've discussed over the last weeks. But there's got to be a compromise at some point between what the health department is recommending and getting people back to work, and that's the decision that's on us. So I'll stop talking now and open it up for any other comments.
The one question I have is, I know Governor Stitt has allowed for elective surgeries to begin on the 24th, I believe, Friday. Is our current resolutions that are out there, that won't conflict with that, will it?
No,
I
sir.
didn't read any. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, sir. That's a good question, but it will not conflict with any resolutions that you've passed.
Okay. That's what I thought, but I wanted to make sure.
Doug, I'll chime in on that. I know at least one of our hospital administrators I talked to today, they have opted to continue to hold off on elective surgeries till May 4th.
And that's perfect. That's good. I mean, I would rather them be able to make the choice, especially not us making the choice, but let them make the choice. So, but that's good information. I just want to make sure of that. And that's great too. I want to applaud you all for meeting with the business owners on Friday to kind of get a pulse on them. I'm getting some emails, and obviously we're seeing some movement towards hopefully opening business soon. And I think it's a great idea that we meet next week and see where we stand, where we are by then. We're seeing some progress, but then again, we seem like today, arguably a setback with the number of deaths, but hopefully things will be winding down soon.
I had a couple of questions. Just by how you phrased those last comments, are we under the authority of the health department? I mean, are we limited by what they say we can do?
Good question.
Not at all.
Okay.
I may have misstated. I kind of made an assumption for the group that we've been listening closely to Dr. Dart. He's been an excellent advocate and voice of reason for what we're doing. And we've said since the beginning that the people to trust were the experts, and that's the experts. So that's more of what I was referring to. That's kind of the path we've been taking. But that we've got to start to consider the economic side more aggressively as we start to kind of flatten this curve.
And then one other is kind of related to that. Seeing as we're under a governor's executive order, what latitude do we have as a municipality to have our own plan for how to phase back into businesses opening?
Julie, you gonna take that?
I will, Mayor. As long as it's reasonable and there are reasons to back it up, the city can certainly have its own plan to have businesses close longer, shelter in place longer, whatever. You know, as you may recall, I think we actually moved in that direction prior to the governor even issuing his order. So once his order is nullified, time expires, the city does have full authority to decide what it wants to do at that point. And different municipalities may require different actions.
And remind me again, when does his executive order expire? 30, same day as ours?
Same time as ours. So I think, go ahead, Kelly.
I was just going to ask about the Owasso hospitals and a rumor that there have been some employees furloughed or laid off. Is there any truth to that at all?
I don't know that I've heard that, but I'll Warren, do you know anything on that?
I've heard that, and I hate to speak to that. I know it's a difficult time for hospitals to not do any elective surgeries, but I couldn't tell you between Hillcrest, St. John, St. Francis. I couldn't confirm anything. No.
Okay. And then Warren, I had another question for you. Can you confirm once again the actual peak time? I've also heard different peak times for even into May as being the peak time for Oklahoma.
Yes, good question. For the last several weeks, the projected peak has been April 22, but it turned into somewhat of a plateau of peak level for April 22 through May 7th. And that's been adjusted recently. I couldn't tell you when. I'm going by the site provided by the State Department of Health. But now the projection is much lower, where they were projecting as many as 22, 3, 4 deaths per day from tomorrow through May 7th. Now they're projecting likely 9 deaths per day for the next 3 days, and then it drops to a projection for 6 deaths by May 5th and 3 deaths per day statewide on May 15th. So it's still kind of it's actually a shorter peak. It's really peaking for the next 4 days and then start to see a drop in deaths. That's what's projected. Again, we hope yesterday's 21 was an anomaly.
Yes, I hope so. Thank you.
Anyone else? So I think based on history and kind of what we've done over the past on this, I would propose that we set a special meeting for next Tuesday, same time, 4 o'clock. Work for everybody?
It does.
Yes.
Yes.
Make it work.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Well, we'll go ahead and move forward with that if there's no more discussion, and we'll see what unfolds. And over the next week, we'll have a lot more information to roll out whatever we're going to do once the state's order ends on the 30th. Okay.
Sounds
We'll
good.
move on to the next item then. Item 7 is consideration and appropriate action relating to a donation from Friends of the Owasso Police and a budget amendment in the general fund. Scott Chambliss was going to present this item, but I believe we've got somebody else presenting.
You have Deputy Chief Woodruff tonight, sir.
Yes, yes. Welcome, Chief.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and City Council. As you're aware, the Friends of Owasso Police Foundation is a nonprofit charitable organization that has a long-standing history of supporting the Owasso Police Department, and especially when it comes to our canine program. One of our canines, Shadow, has faithfully served the community since 2014, but recent health issues have made it difficult for him to continue performing the rigorous duties of a canine officer. As Shadow begins to transition into retirement, the Friends of the Owasso Police Foundation has once again pledged their continued support with a $10,000 donation for the Owasso Police Department's next canine officer. The donation will be used to purchase and train a new canine officer to assume Shadow's place in the agency. Upon retirement, Shadow will continue living with his handler, Officer Harmon. Staff recommends acceptance of the donation from the Friends of Owasso Police and approval of a budget amendment in the general fund, increasing the estimated revenue and the appropriation for expenditures in the Owasso Police Department by $10,000. I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thanks, Chief. Any questions or comments from the council?
Chief, so Shadow, he's served since 2014. How long do we anticipate a canine serving?
Generally, Shadow is 8 years old or getting ready to turn 8. Generally, their lifespans or their years of service is a little bit longer than that, but due to some joint issues with Shadow, it's a little bit earlier than what you would normally expect to see of a lifespan of a canine, but it's still a pretty good tenure for 8 years of service. He came to us in 2014, but he was already trained a year and a half old at that point.
See, so $10,000, that's how much it takes to buy a canine, or?
Yes, sir. Most of that goes into the training of the dog itself. There's several months that go into training the dog before we actually get it at our agency and start putting it into service. That's about the cost to purchase and train the dog to get it ready for the street.
Good. So Friends of Owasso Police, now they've been making quite a few donations. How much have they donated now since they formed? Do you have a total for that?
I don't have a current total. The last total that I had was over $80,000, but that's been several months back. Is what they had raised. So I don't have. I can certainly get that for you, but I don't have a current total for what this most recent donation adds up to.
Well, to me, that's worth touting, and I know, Jerry Fowler, he does a good job of running totals of volunteer hours and money that people and companies put forward. I think that's a great thing for our police department to lift up the Friends of Owasso Police. That's a terrific amount of money, $10,000. And I know it hasn't been that long ago since I think we approved a donation before that. So anyway, kudos to them. Thanking them so much for their contributions to the police department.
They're a great organization. They have really helped out our police force immeasurably.
Yeah, agreed.
Chief, where are the dogs trained? Are they trained locally?
No, generally I'm not familiar with which company we're anticipating using this time, but they can come everywhere from overseas to all around the country. But it's if I'm correct with that, I don't think it's anywhere locally to get them from.
Okay.
Well, I'll jump on the bandwagon and also give a shout out to Friends of Owasso Police. It's pretty amazing when a group of citizens comes together and just comes up with an idea and brings together other citizens in Owasso to fill a need like this. It's I don't know if other communities have that. I'm sure they do, but I sure am especially proud of the group we've got and how hard they work at it. And they obviously are very productive. $80,000 is quite a bit of money that has helped our police force out tremendously over the years. So thank you to them as well.
Yeah, very, very few organizations raise even near what they do for the city.
That's also a credit, though, to our citizens because they support that organization with gifts and donations.
Absolutely.
Well, I'll move we approve.
Second.
Mr. Bonebrake,
Yes.
Mr. Bush,
Yes.
Mr. Dunn,
Yes.
Ms. Lewis,
Yes.
Mr. Kelly.
Yes. Thanks, Chief. Sorry I couldn't recognize you on this tiny little screen here.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, item number 8 is consideration and appropriate action relating to the acquisition of right-of-way and easement for the East 116th Street North from Mingo to Garnett Roadway Improvement Project. Roger Stevens has this item. Welcome, Roger.
Thank you, sir. Good evening, Mr. Mayor and City Council. The item I bring before you this evening is a request to authorize payment for 4,500 square feet of right-of-way and 2,400 square feet of permanent easement. Also, there's 15,599.90 square feet of temporary easement for the East 116th Street North roadway improvement from Mingo to Garnett Road. The offer for the right-of-way is $3 per square foot for a purchase price of $13,500. In addition, compensation for permanent and temporary easement and damages in the amount of $100,222 has been negotiated for a total cost of $113,722. Damages include the following: the permanent and temporary easement, as well as a sign relocation, new gate and electrical controls, security cameras, dumpster enclosure and relocation, aerobic installation, and the office relocation. So with that, I'll get into a little bit of the details in reference to the damages, especially the office relocation. As you can see on the image, of the site map there, the main access point, which is just west of the intersection, which is about 53 foot. That is the main access point into the mini storage. And there on the very east side, there's actually two storage units there that they converted to the office. Well, with the close proximity to the main entrance to the intersection, which, as I mentioned, is 53 feet, we knew that was going to be a huge safety concern for those wanting to take a left turn movement out of there with that intersection being so close. So we recommended to the property owner to move their main entrance back to the west access point there. And by doing so, they wanted to relocate their office space, and that is the reason why that cost is part of the damages. The access point, the west access point, is actually about 353 feet. So definitely a big difference when it comes to the close proximity of the intersection. We definitely believe it's worth the funds because of the safety concern. So I just want to kind of give you a little background why we're proposing to fund the relocation of the office, as well as installing a new gate and cameras and so forth. So with that, funding for the purchase is available in the project budget from the Vision Recapture Fund. With this information in mind, staff recommends authorization for payment in the amount of $113,722 to General Holdings, LLC, for the acquisition of right-of-way, easement, and compensation for damages, located at 9610 East 116th Street North. I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Roger. Questions or comments from the council?
Yeah, Roger, what is it, a couple of things. What does it mean when you talk about temporary easement? What differentiates between a permanent, I mean, obviously a permanent easement is easy to understand. Can you explain to me a temporary easement?
Yes, sir. Temporary is, it's actually a document that is not filed with the courthouse of Tulsa County or either Rogers County. It's actually a living document from beginning of construction till end. And what it allows us to do is make necessary improvements where we're going to tie those access points to the new roadway. So it's not necessarily an easement or a permanent easement that we need. It just gives us the right to make those necessary improvements that would be on or is on private property.
Okay, and so actually, as far as costs, there's not a cost associated, just while construction is going on.
Yeah, it's, I think we paid them $1 for the temporary construction easement.
That's a pretty good deal there.
Yes, sir.
Roger, I'm just looking at the overhead view of this. Was there any consideration with closing that entryway that's so close to the intersection and making the main entrance on Mingo? Because there seems to be kind of a natural opening there on their lot that might have allowed for that. Was that considered?
It was the big concern there is really the size of pipe that's going to be needed. There's a stormwater structure. It's actually the structure itself would be so big, would require a box to cross into from Mingo into the mini storage. Just looking at cost wise, in order to do that, that would be on top of, well, it wouldn't be on top of what we're doing with the relocation, but just the box alone would be around $200,000 to install to get that Mingo to the mini storage.
Okay, you kind of broke up there at the end, but I got the gist of what you were saying.
Yeah, it's just a big RCB concrete stormwater box that would have to be installed just because of the size of that channel and the amount of cubic feet per second will flow from north to south there along that channel.
Well, I know that's important because that's kind of a big flooding area that is alleviated, I guess, by that area.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, though.
My pleasure.
So Roger, they're going to construct a whole new office on that west side now, or are they just taking the one that's existing, somehow moving it down there?
Now they're actually going to construct a new office in the two storage units on the west side now. And so they'll open up the other two that's currently an office, but just basically reconstruct and construct the two storage units on the west side now and make that their main entrance and access point for their customers.
Gotcha. I guess, how hard a negotiation was this? Was that something they were pretty well open to from the get-go, or did you have to work on it a little bit?
It was about 6 meetings in 6 months.
Oh boy. Okay. I can tell. Okay. Well, that's commendable.
Thank you.
Move we approve.
Second.
Mr. Bush?
Looks like we may have lost him.
I think we did. Mr. Bonebreak?
Yes.
Mr. Dunn?
Yes.
Ms. Lewis?
Yes.
Mr. Kelly?
Yes. Julie, how does that affect the meeting at this point, the loss of Councilor Bush?
You continue to have a quorum, Mayor, and
Okay.
you have enough to vote. You have enough people present to vote on the next item.
Okay. We will proceed then. Thank you, Julie. I'm not going to read this entire item. I'll just read the intro. Consideration and appropriate action relating to Resolution 2020-13, approving the incurrence of indebtedness by the Owasso Public Works Authority, issuing a sales tax revenue note, Series 2020. And Linda Jones has this item.
Good evening.
Good evening.
On March 17th of 2020, Council approved professional services agreements with Municipal Finance Services, Inc. and the Public Finance Law Group to develop a financing request for proposal to finance $12 million in city capital projects over the next 12 years. The projects to be funded with the financing include the 62-acre land purchase for the regional detention pond and public works, vehicle maintenance, and parks facilities, as well as street projects, including the widening of Garnett and the intersection improvements at 106th and 145th East Avenue. Financing proposals were received today, and the lowest proposal was received from Bank of Oklahoma at an interest rate of 2.15%. So tonight, staff recommends approval of Resolution 2020-13 authorizing the incurrence of indebtedness by OPWA by issuance of a sales tax revenue note, Series 2020, in the amount of $12 million to be repaid over a 12-year period. And I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you, Linda. Questions or comments from the council?
Linda, the part of the memo, and you probably pointed this out when we talked about this last time, so forgive me for asking again. So it says in your memo, it says both resolutions approve a waiver of competitive bidding. I guess I'm on the right item, right? Of competitive bidding and authorizes a note to be sold on a negotiated basis. So is that to allow our bond counsel or the folks that are working for us to do the negotiations versus just going to straight out bid?
We actually do a bid, but there's something about the legal requirements that required that waiver. In essence, it is a bid, but there's something slightly different about that. If you would like us to get bond counsel on the phone to address that more fully, we can do that. They are waiting by, but it is a technicality that we normally do.
Go this direction.
Yes.
I see. Other question is, so the 12 million, will it be directly deposited into our capital improvements fund? Is that how that works?
It gets deposited with the trustee, and then it gets expended out of the capital improvements fund, and then they reimburse us for those expenses as they are incurred.
So it just sits there in the fund and gets used as needed.
Correct. And what happens is then the interest that is earned on those funds that are sitting there goes against the debt service payments in the future. And there are additional requirements from the federal government on arbitrage where we can't earn a higher interest rate than what we borrowed at. And so there are requirements on that. So it's segregated for that computation.
See, so 2.15%, that's about as good as we could get, right?
It was a good interest rate. A couple of weeks ago, we had hoped to get it a little bit lower, but what happened to us was with the passage of the federal funds for the small business loans, then the banks are really busy making those loans, and we had fewer bidders as a result. So we believe that impacted us somewhat, but it's still an excellent rate.
Yeah. Great. Thank you.
It's a good thing we're complaining about a rate in the low 2%.
Right.
I never thought I would see that day, frankly.
Move we approve.
Second.
Mr. Bonebrake,
Yes.
Mr. Bush. I think we've still lost Councilor Bush. Mr. Dunn,
Yes.
Ms. Lewis,
Yes.
Mr. Kelly.
Yes. Item 10 is consideration and appropriate action relating to a contract for audit services for fiscal year ending June 30th, 2020. Linda?
As we discussed last week, the city is required to have an annual audit performed by a CPA firm, and our audit committee recommended that we issue a request for a proposal this year as our previous contract had expired. And so a request for proposal was sent out, and we had 4 responses. The audit committee met and evaluated the proposals on April 14th, and based on that evaluation, recommended to council that we approve a contract with BT and Company for performance of the auditing services for the year ending June 30, 2020, with options to renew for additional 4 years. I should point out that the proposal that they gave us is expected to be $2,500 less than what we paid in fees last year. So not only were they well qualified to perform our engagement, they were willing to do it at a competitive price. And I say expected because part of the fee is determined upon how many federal audits have to be performed. We don't anticipate more than one, and based on the one, that's what the savings would be. And I'd be happy to answer any questions. Staff recommends approval of a contract with BT & Company for the fiscal year ending June 30, 2020, in the amount of $49,000 for auditing services related to the city and its trust authorities, and $4,000 each for any federal grant audits required under the Single Audit Act.
Thank you, Linda. Questions or comments from the council?
So Linda, go ahead, Linda, sorry.
Linda, we talked about how that we vetted this company and checked their references and things of that nature. Do we as yet know who's going to be the lead auditor, and have we met that person?
I've talked to that person over the phone. It's Miss Hammond. So we didn't actually meet face to face with them, but we did talk over the phone on more than one occasion.
You feel she's got sufficient experience and well qualified?
Yes, I do. That was really one of the deciding factors on the selection of the firm we selected, is their extensive experience in auditing municipalities. They had other governments as well, but they had extensive experience with municipalities, especially other suburbs with similar demographics and size. And we also liked the fact that it wasn't just one person, but a team of 4 people that would be assigned to our engagement that had that extensive experience.
Thank you.
You sort of answered my question, I think, Linda. I was going to ask if they are starting the audit now. I'm assuming that this gets approved. Are they starting immediately, or is it not till after June 30th that they start the process?
Once we have an engagement approved by council, they will start planning. There's always planning that happens before June 30th. Generally, there's also an observance of our inventory account at the golf course on June 30. So there are things they can do ahead of time, but the bulk of the work will be done after June 30.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you.
I move we approve.
Second.
Mr. Bonebrake,
Yes.
Mr. Dunn,
Yes.
Ms. Lewis,
Yes.
Mr. Bush, Mr. Kelly.
Yes. Thank you, Linda. Item number 11 is a report from the city manager.
No report, Mayor.
Item 12 is report from the city attorney.
No report, Mr. Mayor.
Item 13 is report from city council.
I'll give a shout out to Owasso Police Department for taking time to go and take pictures up in front of restaurants and putting those on their Facebook page to try to encourage Owasso citizens to frequent the restaurants. They need all the help they can get right now, and that's one little gesture I think is huge, really, quite frankly, because I'll see that once, see a restaurant maybe I hadn't been to in a while, but they posted and prompts me to go there. So I appreciate them doing that.
Agreed. Anyone else? Okay. Item number 14 is official notices to the council. We are to receive these documents. Item 15 is new business. If there is none, I need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Bonebrake,
Yes.
Mr. Dunn,
Yes.
Ms. Lewis,
Yes.
Mr. Bush, Mr. Kelly.
Yes. We'll now call to order this meeting of the Owasso Public Works Authority. Item number 2 is roll call.
Chair Chris Kelly,
Here.
Vice Chair Bill Bush, Trustee Doug Bonebrake,
Here.
Trustee Lyndall Dunn,
Here.
Trustee Kelly Lewis.
Here.
Item 3 is consideration and appropriate action relating to a request for approval of the consent agenda.
I move we approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Mr. Bonebrake,
Yes.
Mr. Dunn,
Yes.
Ms. Lewis,
Yes.
Mr. Kelly.
Yes. Item 5 is consideration and appropriate action relating to Resolution 2020-03, authorizing the Owasso Public Works Authority to issue its sales tax revenue note, Series 2020, in the aggregate principal amount of $12 million. Ms. Jones is back.
I do want to point out that this is the companion item to the one approved by council earlier in regard to financing the $12 million of capital improvement projects. I did receive word back from bond counsel in response to the question that was asked earlier about the competitive process. And his response indicates that we went through a competitive process, but the difference is we did not have to publish the notice in the paper. And that's how it varied and why the need for the waiver of the competitive thing is the way it was advertised was different. So
Makes sense.
So in order to issue the debt, it requires 2 acts, one by council and one by the authority. So now staff recommends approval by the authority of Resolution 2020-03, authorizing the authority to issue Series 2020 sales tax revenue note in the aggregate principal amount of $12 million for the purpose of financing certain capital improvement projects of the city, ratifying and confirming a sales tax agreement by between the city and the authority pertaining to a year-to-year pledge of certain sales tax revenues, and authorizing the note to be sold on a negotiated basis to the Bank of Oklahoma. And I'd be happy to answer any further questions you have.
Thank you, Linda. Questions or comments from the council?
I'll move we approve.
Second.
Mr. Bonebrake,
Yes.
Mr. Dunn,
Yes.
Ms. Lewis,
Yes.
Mr. Bush, have you joined the meeting? Okay, Mr. Kelly?
Yes.
Yes.
Bill just voted.
Yes, I
Yeah. I've been voting this whole time, but apparently I've been muted on the other side or something.
Welcome back, Bill. Item number 6 is report from the OPWA manager.
No report, Mr. Chairman.
Item 7 is report from the OPWA attorney.
No report, Mr. Chairman.
Item 8 is official notices to the authority. We are in receipt of these documents. Item 9 is new business. There is none. I need a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second.
Mr. Bonebrake,
Yes.
Mr. Dunn,
Yes.
Mr. Bush,
Yes.
Ms. Lewis,
Yes.
Mr. Kelly.
Yes. We'll now call to order this meeting of the Owasso Public Golf Authority. Item number 2 is roll call.
Chair Chris Kelly,
Here.
Vice Chair Bill Bush,
Here.
Trustee Doug Bonebrake,
Here.
Trustee Lyndall Dunn,
Here.
Trustee Kelly Lewis.
Here.
Item 3 is consideration and appropriate action relating to a request for approval of the consent agenda.
I'll move to approve.
Second.
Mr. Bonebrake,
Yes.
Mr. Dunn,
Yes.
Mr. Bush,
Yes.
Ms. Lewis,
Yes.
Mr. Kelly.
Yes. Item 5 is report from the OPGA manager.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At this time, I'd like to introduce our Bailey Ranch Director of Golf, Corey Bird, for a report.
Hey, Corey.
Mr. Chairman and trustees, thank you for having me here tonight. Normally this time of year I come and give a presentation, a nice slideshow, and talk about all the great things that are going on at the golf course, but I thought more fitting I would talk a little bit about our COVID-19 precautions and some of the things that we're doing at the golf course to keep our employees safe and keep the community safe. Back when this all hit, we made a quick couple of changes, trying to just alleviate touch points. All the doors are open coming in from each side of the building. No customer, no employee has to touch doors. And then we started making plans for doing what we call single rider carts. Each person is required to take a golf cart by themselves, and that golf cart has been sanitized each time it comes in. So that's kind of changed the way we can do our tee times. We've moved our tee times to 15-minute intervals because of the limited amount of carts. We only allow fivesomes if somebody is walking or if somebody has their own private golf cart. So that's 16 to 20 max golfers per hour, and 16 to 20 carts. We only have 68 golf carts. So we've moved our intervals to 15 minutes and required everybody to make tee times. As far as the staff is concerned, though, we tried to do as much as we could to not interact with customers by handling cash, handling credit cards, handling any of their equipment, range balls, things that they might have touched. We let the customers swipe their own credit cards. We have hand sanitizer. We encourage them to use credit cards or debit cards, but if they do use cash, we have hand sanitizer that we obviously use after we handle that cash. And for the most part, everything has been received very well, with the exception of the limited availability of tee times. There's basically three public golf courses that are open currently in the metro area: Battle Creek and Broken Arrow, Forest Ridge and Broken Arrow, and us. So with all those golfers displaced from the city courses and the county courses, we're very popular. It's reminiscent of back in the mid '90s when you had to think ahead 7 days. Am I going to get to play? And then you had to get on the call and on the phone and get lucky to get a tee time. We're at that again. We have tee times booked up till 6 o'clock for the next 5 to 6 days. So some customers that are used to having a high supply and low demand are not planning ahead, so they're calling in. And for the most part, they've been congenial, I guess is the word I'm going to say. We have been hung up on a couple of times. But for the most part, everybody seems glad that we're open. They seem happy with the steps that we're taking to try to keep them safe. And so we haven't had any problems. If you drive by the golf course or if you live on the golf course, you might get the interpretation that, wow, we're really just slammed. And that is not really the case. 4 golf carts and 4 people looks like a lot of people, but it's really not. As I said earlier, we're doing 16 to 20 golfers per hour. So I think Debbie Grace has gotten a few phone calls at the switchboard complaining that it's jammed and crowded and all that. But as of today, I ran the report for rounds played through April, and we're only up like 300 rounds this month. So on a day-by-day basis, that's not very many at all. So I feel pretty good about that. We've had a couple of employees that we've had to self-quarantine. One took a trip to California, and we self-quarantined them. One took a trip to Colorado. We self-quarantined her. We've moved Megan McDaniels, that is a high-risk situation, to maintenance. She's now working at maintenance and helping Chris, so it helped us to not have to send her home. And then Don Clemens, one of our older gentlemen that works for us, he's high risk as well, and he's chosen to just stay at home until things settle down. So overall, from a standpoint, I feel pretty good about what we're doing at the golf course. I think everybody's excited. The indications I'm getting from my fellow pros and people in the golf industries is that the county courses could potentially open. This is not set in stone. Could potentially open first part of May. And then I think the city courses and the country clubs, I've heard mid-May. So we can hang in there for a couple more weeks. I think we'll get some of the pressure taken off of us. But other than just disappointing a lot of people because we don't have the availability, I think things are going really well at the golf course. I'll entertain any questions about those precautions right now and then talk about a couple of little items.
All right, Corey, do you anticipate maintenance issues because your carts are being used at a higher rate now? And what about fuel costs?
The one good thing about the decision we made 6 years ago to switch to gasoline golf carts is we don't have to worry about charging golf carts. If we were trying to operate the way we're doing right now with an electric fleet, it would be virtually impossible. We would have to do probably something totally different, like only require 2 carts per group, and people would have to walk, but we wouldn't be able to work the way we are. We are getting a little bit more wear and tear. It's not bad at all. The main thing is the wear and tear on the golf course, because you get more and more tires than normal, and people don't really understand the effects that golf carts and equipment and tires have on grass, but it's a living organism. So you run over it, you get some wear patterns. So we're going to deal with a little bit of that, but overall, I think we're doing pretty well. Maintenance is one thing I did not talk about is maintenance is starting to ramp up their employees for their seasonal help to maintain the golf course, and Chris is bringing them in shifts so that they're not 12 to 15 people in a room together getting their assignments. So he's bringing in 4 or 5, 4 or 5, 4 or 5. So I commend Chris on making those decisions. It's kind of difficult for him. Adds a degree of difficulty to his job, but he seems certainly willing and understanding, and has done that on his own.
Yeah, I heard a funny story from my son who works at another golf course, and he says on their maintenance meetings they don't have a big enough room, so they have to get all the equipment out of the equipment barn so they can all stand at sufficient distance from one another to have their meeting in the morning.
Yeah, and you have to. We're having to disinfect equipment because a lot of times guys will share equipment, so you're having to disinfect equipment after each use. So there's some additional steps. Overall, I think the positive is after this, I think we're going to be as clean as we could be. I mean, we're washing golf carts head to toe, anything they could touch, handrails, side rails, seats, steering wheels. So my cart staff is definitely getting an education on what a good clean cart looks like.
So Corey, and you may have already said this, are the number of tee times down because of the limited number of golf carts, did you say, or just trying to space people out so that there's not a big group of 10 people hanging around?
Well, our limited amount of golf carts is one issue. So every 15 minutes maxes out our golf cart usage. So every 4 hours, those carts that went out will come in so that we can sufficiently wash them, sanitize them, get them ready for the next group. With 68 carts, if we had more carts, we could potentially go a little bit closer together. But 15 minutes seems to be the standard for golf courses that have remained open, just to kind of limit the traffic through the pro shop.
So that brings me actually to my second question. Do we allow people just to not use a cart and walk without actually having a cart?
We do, actually. That's the only scenario where if you were a person or a twosome or a threesome that was willing to walk, we can fit those in. We usually allow 1 an hour. We don't try to do more than that because then it slows down pace of play and our cart flow traffic doesn't come back around in time. But yes, we do allow walking, and I've seen a lot more walkers. They're desperate. They're much more willing to walk at this point.
Well, I really appreciate you guys' attention to detail and just really taking it to heart as far as doing everything that is possible on keeping everything sanitized like you are. It sounds like you're doing a great job.
Thank you, man.
Corey, in regard to the wear and tear on the course because of so many carts, have you considered doing cart path only, or do you think that would help?
At this point, as the grass is not really fully growing, Bermuda grass usually needs soil temperature 65, 70 degrees to really be aggressive. That's not a real consideration yet. I think Mother Nature is going to put us on the cart paths tomorrow and probably this weekend. We're going to get 2 to 3 inches of rain, so we'll be cart paths only. So that'll be a little bit of a break for the golf course.
So I just want to point out to those that are listening in on this, I know there's been some different communities have done different things with golf courses, and for those that might think that it's unusual that we still have our golf course open, I just want to reiterate that we actually posed this to Dr. Dart at the Tulsa County Health Department and got his input. And Corey, you're following every single thing that Dr. Dart said you need to follow in order to achieve his recommendation of keeping the golf course open, or he would only keep it open if he did those things. So I want to make sure everybody understands that you guys are working really hard to make this thing as sanitary as possible, but still be able to get people outdoors and enjoying the outdoors and doing it in a safe way, which I think is an important thing in this very difficult time. So excellent job on your part.
Thank you. If there's no more questions about the COVID-19, I will talk about just a couple of our plans that we're working on right now. I've talked about a long-term strategic plan for items that need to be worked on. Chris and I are still currently working on a plan for hopefully regrassing our putting greens. They're almost 30 years old now, so we're running into some issues with that. There is the issue of a bridge, a golf cart bridge that came in way over budget last year on the bids that we've got. We are currently re-engineering that so it will fit within those budget constraints. So that'll be more of a fall project. So that'll be coming up. And then we have a tie wall and a creek issue on hole number 2 where the tie wall is starting to fail. It's always been my belief in the 20 years that I've been there that the tie walls were great. The longevity of them is not what we want, so we're in the process of phasing those out. We did that on hole number 16 a few years ago, where we just removed it and sloped the ground down to the water. And we're looking at doing something of that nature on hole number 2 as well. But those are the 3 main items right now that my staff and I are working on, trying to get a plan together to continue to be one of the top golf courses in Oklahoma. And that concludes my report, and I'll answer any more questions if you have any of those.
Thank you, Corey.
Thank you.
Thank you, Corey. And Mr. Chairman, I have no further report.
All right, we'll move on to item number 6, report from our OPGA attorney.
No report, Mr. Chairman.
Item 7 is official notices to the authority. We are in receipt of these documents. Item 8 is new business. There is none. I need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
So move. Second.
Mr. Bumbrake,
Yes.
Mr. Dunn,
Yes.
Mr. Bush,
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Lewis,
Yes.
Mr. Kelly.
Yes. All right. Thank you, everybody. Have a great evening.
Thank you all. Have a good evening.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, counselors.
Bye-bye.